My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been a professional photographer for over 20 years. I've captured everything from celebrity weddings to presidential campaigns, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I discovered in a box of old photographs last Tuesday. What started as a routine archive review turned into the most chilling mystery I've ever encountered, one that's kept me awake for 6 straight nights. It was June 15, 2011, when I was hired to photograph the graduation ceremony at Millbrook High School in rural Pennsylvania. I remember being struck by how picture-perfect everything seemed that morning. The weather was absolutely flawless, not a single cloud in the brilliant blue sky, temperature hovering at a comfortable 72 degrees. The kind of day that makes you believe everything is right with the world. The graduating class of 2011 consisted of exactly 47 students, a tight-knit group from a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. As I set up my equipment on the makeshift stage, I watched proud families filling the wooden bleachers, their faces glowing with anticipation. Mothers clutched tissues, fathers adjusted their ties, and younger siblings fidgeted in their Sunday best. Principal Margaret Hawthorne, a woman who'd dedicated 35 years to education, stood at the podium with tears already forming in her eyes. She'd watched many of these kids grow up from kindergarten, and this moment represented the culmination of everything she'd worked for. The valedictorian, Sarah Mitchell, a brilliant girl headed to MIT, was practicing her speech one final time behind the stage, her hands trembling slightly with nervous excitement. What struck me most about that day was the overwhelming sense of community. This wasn't just another graduation ceremony, it was a celebration of shared dreams and collective achievement. The town's population was barely 2,000 people, and it seemed like half of them had turned out to witness this milestone. Local business owners had donated flowers, the mayor had personally helped set up chairs, and the fire department volunteered to direct parking. I began shooting at exactly 10 a.m., just as the processional music started. The graduates filed onto the field in perfect formation, their black caps and gowns fluttering in the gentle breeze. Through my lens, I captured beaming smiles, nervous laughter, and the unmistakable glow of young people standing on the threshold of their futures. Sarah Mitchell delivered a speech about dreams having no expiration date. Tommy Rodriguez hugged his grandmother, who had worked 3 jobs to help pay for his college. Jessica Walsh waved to her deployed father via video call, held up by her tearful mother. The ceremony concluded at 11:47 a.m. with the traditional cap toss, 47 graduation caps soaring against that impossibly blue sky like black birds taking flight. I captured it all, the moment of pure joy, the explosion of cheers from the crowd, families rushing onto the field for embraces and photographs. It was, by every measure, a perfect graduation day. By 1:30 p.m., I had packed up my equipment and was heading back to my studio in Pittsburgh, completely satisfied with the work I'd done. I had nearly 800 photographs documenting every precious moment of Millbrook High School's class of 2011. Parents would treasure these images for decades to come, and I felt proud to have been part of preserving their memories. The first sign that something was wrong came exactly 3 hours later. At 4:43 p.m. that same afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Millbrook Police Department, which struck me as odd since I'd never had any previous contact with law enforcement in that small town. Sergeant David Morrison introduced himself, and the first words out of his mouth made my blood run cold. "Mr. Chen, we need to speak with you immediately about the Millbrook High School graduation ceremony you photographed this morning. Can you come back to town right away?" When I asked what the emergency was, Sergeant Morrison's voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. "The entire graduating class is missing, sir. All 47 students vanished sometime after the ceremony ended. We're hoping your photographs might provide some clues about what happened." The 2-hour drive back to Millbrook felt like an eternity. My mind raced with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Mass kidnapping? Some kind of accident? A prank gone horribly wrong? None of it made sense. I had literally watched these kids celebrate with their families just hours earlier. When I arrived at the Millbrook police station, the scene was absolute chaos. Frantic parents filled every available seat, their voices creating a symphony of anguish and confusion. Some were shouting at officers demanding answers, others were crying into their phones, and a few sat in stunned silence, staring at nothing. The small police force, normally dealing with traffic violations and the occasional domestic disturbance, was completely overwhelmed. Sergeant Morrison led me to a cramped conference room where FBI agent Rebecca Foster was waiting. She explained that the disappearance had been reported when families returned to the school around 3 p.m. for a planned post-graduation picnic. The graduates were supposed to meet in the gymnasium to change out of their caps and gowns, but when parents arrived, they found 47 sets of graduation attire neatly folded on the basketball court, and not a single student anywhere in the building. Agent Foster emphasized the impossibility of the situation. The school had been locked after the ceremony, with only Principal Hawthorne having access. Security cameras showed no one entering or leaving the building after 2:15 p.m. The graduates' cars remained in the parking lot, keys still in ignitions. Cell phones were found with the folded clothes, all showing missed calls from increasingly worried parents. What makes this even stranger, Agent Foster continued, is that multiple witnesses reported seeing the students after the ceremony ended. Parents remember hugging their children, making plans for dinner, discussing summer jobs. But somehow, between then and 3 p.m., 47 young adults simply vanished into thin air. I immediately offered to review my photographs, hoping they might contain some crucial detail everyone else had missed. Agent Foster set up a laptop, and I began methodically going through every image I'd captured that morning. The early shots showed everything exactly as I remembered: excited families, nervous graduates, a perfect small-town celebration. But as I reached the photographs taken during the actual ceremony, something began to feel off. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what was bothering me, but there was an unsettling quality to certain images that I hadn't noticed while taking them. The lighting seemed inconsistent in ways that defied the perfectly clear weather. Some faces appeared slightly blurred despite my camera's sharp focus. And there were shadows that didn't seem to match the sun's position. The final photograph I'd taken, the traditional cap toss at 11:47 a.m., stopped me cold. In the image, 47 graduation caps were frozen in mid-air against that brilliant blue sky. But something about their positioning looked wrong, almost choreographed, as if they'd been placed there rather than thrown naturally. It was Agent Foster who noticed what would become our first real clue. "Mr. Chen," she said, leaning closer to the laptop screen, "can you count the caps in this photograph?" I zoomed in and began counting carefully. 1, 2, 3, 15, 16, 17, 32, 33, 46. There were only 46 caps in the air. But there had been 47 graduates. The discovery of the missing cap sent shockwaves through the investigation. Agent Foster immediately assembled a team to examine every graduation photograph with forensic precision, while I spent the night in Millbrook's only motel, unable to shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. By morning, the FBI's analysis had revealed disturbing inconsistencies throughout my entire photo collection. Digital forensics expert Dr. Amanda Walsh, ironically, the mother of missing graduate Jessica Walsh, discovered that the metadata for several photographs showed impossible timestamps. Some images were allegedly taken at times when I had clear documentation of being elsewhere. More unsettling was the revelation that certain graduates appeared in fewer photographs than others. While most students showed up in 30 to 40 images throughout the ceremony, 7 specific individuals appeared in less than 10 photos each. These 7, including valedictorian Sarah Mitchell, seemed to fade in and out of the visual record as if they were somehow less present than their classmates. Dr. Walsh's voice trembled as she shared her most disturbing finding. The facial recognition software is having difficulty identifying these 7 students in the photographs. The features are consistent with their school ID photos, but there's something the computer can't quantify, a quality that makes it uncertain these are the same people. I requested access to Millbrook High School security footage from that morning, hoping to cross-reference my photographs with video evidence. What we found defied explanation. The school's cameras had captured the entire ceremony, but when we compared the footage to my photographs, they showed completely different scenes at identical timestamps. In my photographs, the graduates sat in neat rows, listening attentively to speeches. But the security footage from the same moments showed empty chairs scattered randomly across the field. My images captured families cheering in the bleachers. The video revealed vacant wooden benches. Most impossibly, while my final photograph showed the cap toss celebration, the security footage from 11:47 a.m. displayed nothing but an empty field under an overcast sky. Agent Foster brought in Dr. Richard Pemberton, a physicist from Carnegie Mellon University, to examine the impossible contradictions between photographic and video evidence. Dr. Pemberton spent 3 days analyzing every piece of visual data we'd collected, running tests that pushed the boundaries of conventional science. His preliminary report was terrifying in its implications. The photographs show evidence of what I can only describe as temporal displacement, Dr. Pemberton explained during a tense briefing. The light patterns, shadow angles, and atmospheric conditions suggest these images were taken across multiple time periods, possibly spanning weeks or even months, yet compressed into a single morning. But the most chilling discovery came when we enhanced the background of my photographs using advanced imaging software. Hidden behind the celebrating families, barely visible in the deep shadows beneath the bleachers, were shapes that shouldn't have been there. At first, they appeared to be photographic artifacts or processing errors. But as we adjusted contrast and sharpness, the shapes became unmistakably human figures. These shadow figures wore clothing that didn't match the 2011 time period. Their postures suggested they were observing the ceremony, but their faces were completely obscured by darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than simply blocking it. Most disturbing of all, we counted exactly 47 of these shadow observers, one for each missing graduate. Dr. Walsh made the connection that sent ice through my veins. The positioning of these shadow figures corresponds exactly to where the missing students were sitting during the ceremony. It's as if something was watching from those exact positions, waiting. As we delved deeper into the analysis, I began experiencing severe headaches and recurring dreams about that graduation day. But in my dreams, the ceremony never ended. The graduates remained frozen in their seats while the shadow figures slowly moved closer, eventually occupying the same space as the students themselves. Agent Foster noticed my deteriorating condition and insisted I undergo medical evaluation. The doctor found nothing physically wrong, but recommended I stop working on the case. "You're exhibiting symptoms of severe psychological stress," she warned. "Whatever you're investigating, it's affecting your mental health." But I couldn't stop. Not when we were so close to understanding what had happened to those 47 young people. Not when every new piece of evidence suggested we were dealing with something far beyond a simple missing persons case. The breakthrough came on my 7th night in Millbrook, when I decided to examine my camera equipment for any technical malfunctions that might explain the photographic anomalies. What I found hidden in my camera's memory card would change everything I thought I knew about that perfect graduation day. Buried deep in my camera's internal memory, beyond the 783 photographs I had consciously taken, were 12 additional images that I had no recollection of capturing. These hidden photographs showed the Millbrook High graduation field at different times of day, some during dawn, others at dusk, and several in complete darkness, all featuring the same 47 graduates in identical positions. The timestamp data revealed these mysterious images were taken across a span of 14 days, beginning 2 weeks before the actual graduation ceremony. In each photograph, the students appeared exactly as they had on June 15, 2011, wearing the same expressions, maintaining the same postures, as if they were trapped in an endless loop of that single moment. Dr. Pemberton's analysis of these hidden images yielded results that challenged our fundamental understanding of reality. The light spectra in these photographs are consistent with different atmospheric conditions across multiple time periods, he explained, his voice barely above a whisper. These students weren't just photographed once, they were somehow experiencing the same graduation ceremony repeatedly. But the most disturbing hidden image was the last one, time-stamped for June 29, 2011, exactly 14 days after the graduation. This photograph showed the field completely empty except for 47 dark silhouettes burned into the grass where each graduate had been sitting. The shadow figures from beneath the bleachers were now clearly visible in the foreground, no longer hiding but standing in formation as if they had finally completed their purpose. Agent Foster immediately dispatched a forensics team to examine the actual graduation field. What they found corroborated the hidden photograph in ways that defied explanation. Burned into the grass were 47 human-shaped marks, each exactly the size and position of where the graduates had sat during the ceremony. Soil analysis revealed that the grass had been dying for weeks, not days, suggesting the burning had begun long before the graduation ever took place. Local historians provided context that made the situation even more unsettling. The field where Millbrook High held graduations had been the site of a tragic event in 1957. 47 students from that year's graduating class had died in a bus accident on their way to a celebratory dance, exactly 54 years before the 2011 disappearance. The victims were buried in Millbrook Cemetery, their graves arranged in rows that perfectly matched the seating arrangement for the 2011 graduation ceremony. I couldn't resist visiting the cemetery, despite Agent Foster's warnings about my deteriorating mental state. What I found there shattered what remained of my rational worldview. Each gravestone bore a photograph of the deceased student, and when I compared these 1957 portraits to my 2011 graduation photographs, the faces were identical. The class of 2011 weren't just missing, they were the same people who had died in 1957, somehow returned to experience the graduation ceremony they had been denied by tragedy. The shadow figures in my photographs weren't observers. They were the original spirits of these students, waiting 54 years to reclaim the moment that had been stolen from them. Dr. Walsh's voice broke as she read the final piece of evidence from the school's archives. There's a record here of Principal Hawthorne's grandfather. He was the principal in 1957 when the bus accident occurred. His notes mention a promise he made to hold the graduation ceremony anyway, even if the students couldn't be there to receive their diplomas. The current Principal Hawthorne had been continuing her grandfather's tradition, holding a symbolic ceremony every year on the anniversary of the accident. But somehow, in 2011, the symbolic had become terrifyingly real. The dead students had finally returned to claim their graduation, and the living students who had taken their places, had taken their place in whatever realm the dead had vacated. But there was one more hidden photograph I hadn't examined yet, one that my camera had somehow taken automatically while I was packing my equipment to leave on June 15th. This final image would reveal the most horrifying truth of all. The final hidden photograph showed me walking to my car after the graduation ceremony, but I wasn't alone. Following exactly 3 steps behind me were 47 translucent figures, the missing graduates, their faces filled with an expression I'll never forget. It wasn't fear or confusion. It was gratitude. Dr. Pemberton's analysis of this image revealed quantum signatures that shouldn't exist in conventional photography. These figures exist in a state of temporal flux, he explained, his hands shaking as he pointed to the data. They're simultaneously in 1957 and 2011, caught between death and graduation, unable to move forward until they received what they were denied. But the most shocking revelation came when Agent Foster received the forensics report on my camera equipment. Hidden within the camera circuitry were modifications I had never made. Modifications that dated back to 1957. The camera had been altered by someone with advanced knowledge of both photography and quantum physics, someone who had been preparing for this moment for over 50 years. The name engraved on the tiny modification components was H. Chen, my grandfather, a physicist who had died when I was 10 years old. I had always known he worked on classified government projects, but I never understood the true nature of his research. Until now. Agent Foster located my grandfather's sealed government files, classified until 2025. What we found inside explained everything and made it infinitely more terrifying. My grandfather had been part of a secret project studying temporal anomalies and spiritual energy. The 1957 bus accident hadn't been an accident at all. It was the result of an experimental device designed to bridge the gap between life and death. The experiment had gone horribly wrong, trapping 47 souls in a temporal loop, reliving the graduation day they never experienced. My grandfather spent the rest of his life trying to correct his mistake, eventually developing the camera modifications that would allow someone to document and finally complete the interrupted ceremony. He had trained me as a photographer from childhood, never telling me the real reason. He had ensured I would be in Millbrook on June 15, 2011. Exactly 54 years after the tragedy he had caused. The perfect weather, the flawless ceremony, even my presence there. All of it had been orchestrated across decades to finally give those trapped souls what they needed to find peace. The missing class of 2011 hadn't been kidnapped or killed. They had been chosen as vessels, temporarily sharing their bodies with the spirits from 1957 so both groups could experience graduation together. The ceremony in my photographs was real. It just involved students from two different eras occupying the same space and time. But here's the part that still keeps me awake at night. The hidden photographs weren't just documentation. They were a countdown. My grandfather's device required 14 days to complete the temporal bridge, and my camera was recording each step of the process. The disappearance on June 15th was just the moment when the bridge was finally complete. The current class of 2011 is alive and well, though they have no memory of the supernatural graduation they participated in. They remember walking into the gymnasium to change clothes, then waking up in their beds the next morning with their diplomas mysteriously placed on their nightstands. To them, they simply attended graduation and went home. But the class of 1957 finally got their moment. In my photographs, you can see both sets of students occupying the same space, the living providing the physical presence, the dead providing the emotional fulfillment they had been seeking for 54 years. The cap toss wasn't captured by 47 graduates, it was captured by 94 souls celebrating together, which is why the image looked so impossibly perfect. The shadow figures weren't threats. They were guardians, ensuring that both groups of students could safely share this moment without anyone getting permanently lost between worlds. When the ceremony ended, the temporal bridge closed, sending each group back to their proper place in time. I never told Agent Foster or Dr. Pemberton the final piece of the puzzle, something I discovered only when I returned to Pittsburgh and developed the last roll of film from my grandfather's old camera, left to me in his will. The roll I had never used because I preferred digital photography. On that film was a single image, a photograph of me at age 10, standing next to my grandfather in his laboratory. But in the background, barely visible, were the same 47 shadow figures that had appeared in my Millbrook photographs. They had been waiting by his side for decades, trusting that someday his grandson would complete the work he had started. The graduation ceremony worked. The class of 1957 finally found peace. The class of 2011 got to experience the most meaningful graduation in the school's history, even if they don't remember it. And I fulfilled a destiny that had been planned before I was even born. But sometimes, late at night when I'm developing photographs in my darkroom, I see new shadow figures in the corners of my images. Different faces, different eras, all waiting for their own interrupted moments to be completed. My grandfather's work is done, but mine is just beginning. The camera modifications are still active, still recording temporal anomalies that ordinary eyes can't see. And somewhere out there are other photographers, other descendants of scientists who dabbled in things they shouldn't have, carrying equipment they don't understand to document ceremonies that exist in more than one timeline. I've learned to recognize the signs now. The perfect, whether that's too perfect. The emotions that feel amplified beyond normal human range. The shadows that don't match the light source. Because the truth is, the Millbrook graduation wasn't unique. It was just the first one I was meant to witness and document. There are others, scattered across time and space, waiting for someone with the right equipment and the right bloodline to help them find completion. And now that I know what to look for, I can see them everywhere. The dead don't stay dead when they have unfinished business. They just wait, sometimes for decades, sometimes for centuries, until someone comes along who can bridge the gap between what was lost and what needs to be found. I am that bridge now. And my camera is ready to capture every impossible moment.